Hey guys, before I get started, don't forget tonight AMA, 7:30 Mountain Standard Time. A great chance to talk, ask questions, talk about the current financial markets. Any questions you got? Come to the AMA, 7:30 tonight, Mountain Standard Time. All right. So, have you ever noticed that Treasury secretaries, doesn't have to be Janet Yellen, could be any Treasury secretary, Fed chairman, any Fed chairman, they don't really come out and say ever, hey guys, we're looking at a financial apocalypse. And I've talked about why, because it's a self fulfilling prophecy. If they say it's going to be negative, they're kind of like salesmen to a certain degree. Do you ever have a realtor, if you're looking for a house, go, hey, now's not a good time to buy a house? They never say it because their job is to sell houses. And their job in the Treasury Secretary and the Fed chair is to keep the market stable. So they're always going to paint a rosier picture than reality. Do you remember here's a proof. Remember back in 08? Who was it? Ben Bernanke said, I don't see a systemic risk with these loans. He said that to Congress. And it was like a month later, the TARP, Troubled Asset Release Program, came out. And so anyways, my point is, if you take these people at their word, they have to lie to you. They cannot tell you the truth because it would be a self-fulfilling prophecy. No greater example than Janet Yellen's recent interview with CNN. I'm going to poke some holes in this, some logical holes in this. And you can make up your own mind, but logically, what she's saying is impossible. And I'll tell you why. So let's take a look at this interview, and then we'll take a look at the article itself.
You can achieve what people are calling this immaculate slowdown, where you slow down the economy enough to cut inflation, but not so much that it throws a lot of people out of work.
That's right.
I mean, mostly economists have often viewed this as a trade-off.
I think that what people call a soft landing is possible. So I do think there's a path to bring down inflation while maintaining what I think all of us would regard as a strong labor market. And the evidence that I'm seeing suggests we are on that path. Now, are there risks? Of course, I don't want to downplay the possibility that there are risks here, but I do think that's possible. There are many factors that have been pushing inflation up that have nothing to do with the tight labor market. Russia's war on Ukraine raised food and energy prices. The disruption from the pandemic caused supply bottlenecks that led to outright shortages, pushed up, for example, the prices of cars dramatically, new and used cars, because of shortages of semiconductors. We're seeing those supply chain bottlenecks that boosted inflation. They're beginning to resolve. We had big shifts in the way people live and low interest rates, and housing prices rose a lot. Now housing prices have essentially settled down. Rental prices of new rental units moved up a lot, but they've now settled down and are falling. And that's an element of inflation that will continue to subside over time.
Oh, Janet. Her voice is hilarious. All right, so a couple of holes here. Number one, she talks about, and then we'll get into the article. Notice she doesn't blame Congress. It wasn't spending. It never is a spending problem. And yes, all the things she talked about add to inflation. But what caused the supply bottleneck? Was it what Congress did? What about printing 40% of all currency units in existence? And one thing to focus on that's very important. We live in a debt-based monetary system. So when I say that, you go, okay, so what? When there is no more debt to come online and money is not flowing to pay off the previous debt, which what happened the last 2 years was tons and tons and tons and tons of debt. Tons of debt. Government, business, housing, everything. So what happens when you all of a sudden just tighten all debt and lending standards in a debt-based monetary system? Jobs go away. Credit is tightened. And credit is what is needed. Easy, cheap credit, money flowing is what is needed for the job market, for businesses to start. Because every business runs on credit and debt and restructuring and all this kind of stuff. So all of a sudden you just tighten money supply. What she is saying is impossible without loosening money supply and credit. Again, it is impossible. You will guaranteed see jobs being cut. And all this data obviously is coming from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And it's up to you if you trust them. But CPI and Bureau of Labor Statistics, all the stats that we're going off of, you think to yourself, my lying eyes tell me that there's a problem in the economy. But I gotta trust this gal, Janet Yellen, because she says everything's fine. And even if you need to parse that out, all you need to understand is that we have a debt-based monetary system. And if you have a debt-based monetary system, you need more currency units, more debt to pay off the previous debt. And if that doesn't happen, you're going to have layoffs, you're going to have bankruptcies in that order. Okay, so it's going to be a mess if these tight financial conditions continue. It just is. And more than anything else, the mess is going to be for the federal debt, which is like the big one, right? We have $32 trillion in debt. Inflation last year was at 9%. To get a real rate of return, meaning beating inflation, government advertised inflation, you need at least 10. What's 10% of 32 trillion? 3.2 trillion. What are our tax receipts? 4.5. It's impossible. So if you understand that math, you realize the path they're walking and pretending to walk is impossible. So let's take a look at the article here and poke some more holes in the logic of fairyland. Says here at the top, Yellen on how the U.S. can bring down inflation while maintaining a strong jobs market. You already listened to the interview, but she has to say that. You got to understand, right? She has to say that. So it says here, last month's upheaval in the banking sector hasn't pushed America off course of achieving a soft landing. Now, keep in mind, what was the solution to the banking sector crisis to stop systemic risk? Is they made up another rule where they can put treasuries on the Federal Reserve's balance sheet and they'll give them 100 cents on the dollar, which no matter what you say, that's liquidity in the market. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen told CNN's Fareed Zakaria, who's the same guy who was talking about death of the dollar a couple weeks ago. Okay, Yellen cited the factor that we are pushing up inflation. Yellen cited that the factors that have pushed up inflation go well beyond tightness seen in the U.S. labor market. Notably, by the way, these are all downstream effects of money printing and stupidity. So when you see tightness in the labor market, where did that come from all of a sudden? It just came out of nowhere. Notably, Russia's war in Ukraine. Of course, we got to blame them. I'm not saying it's not a factor, but they never blame themselves, which raised food and energy prices and pandemic-era supply chain disruptors, which caused key material shortages that gummed up that. Okay, it was the response, right? It was the response to the pandemic. It wasn't. The supply shortages didn't come out of nowhere. It came from politicians. This is why I think when all else fails, they go to war, because they got to blame somebody, and it can't be them. She says, I think a strong labor market brings down inflation, and bringing down inflation are compatible goals. They aren't. Not in a debt-based monetary system. The reason being is basically jobs are loaned into existence to a certain degree, because businesses take on loans to expand their business, to give bigger or more jobs, etc. And then they pay off those loans through cash flow, etc. So if they don't have access to more capital, they have to lay people off, which is what's happening right now, because labor debt and money supply are shrinking, and interest rates are getting bigger, and lending standards are tightening. So they're not just handing out money willy-nilly anymore. U.S. economic data released last week shows continued signs of cooling in areas of inflation and consumer spending. Why is inflation cooling? They're destroying demand. What does destroying demand do? It destroys jobs. 70% consumption economy. So cool, you can bring down inflation, but it's going to destroy jobs. So if you realize why, it's heads is bad, tails is bad. Both sides suck, because we're going to destroy demand to lower inflation, which causes recession, depression, or we're going to have to print again. And they got to sell it to you as something, hey, it's a great time to buy a house. Always a great time to buy a house. They're realtors. Okay. Last month's collapse of Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank triggered a crisis in the United States banking sector. Of course, that was avoided by more liquidity from infinite money printer known as the Fed. Okay, Treasury, in conjunction with the Federal Reserve and Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, intervened. The free market wouldn't intervene, because that would have been suicide, right? To buy those toxic assets. So a money printer intervened. Okay. Americans should note that America has a safe, strong banking system. She said, our banking system is well capitalized and liquid. If it's liquid, why did you have to get involved in it? Whoopsie daisy. Okay. And the problems a couple of banks faced. This is not a general problem throughout the banking system. We took steps to make sure that the depositors feel that their savings are safe, and tools that we use to blah, 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 to prevent contagion. Cool. If it's safe and strong, why did you have to intervene with a money printer funded by, drumroll please, the taxpayer? Us. It's so funny, because they're like, hey, it's very strong, it's very liquid, don't be alarmed. Okay, panic. All right, taxpayers got to bail this business out. Just like, wait, you don't want to call it a bailout. Make sure you understand that. And here's one of the funniest ones from the interview. In an interview with Zakaria, Yellen said that Russia should pay for the damages caused in Ukraine, and talks of ongoing potential mechanisms to make that happen, i.e. the $600 billion they froze of Russian assets in U.S. treasuries. So, she's assuming that Ukraine won't be part of Russia. I think Russia wants to rebuild Ukraine if it's part of Russia, which in these leaked documents over the last week or so, you realize, wait a second, that wars ain't going so well for America and Ukraine. Continually poking the bear, as America is wont to do. But my point is, all of this talk from Treasury Secretary, Federal Reserve Chairman, they have to sell you on a dream. They cannot tell you reality. But reality, to me, it doesn't matter your opinion. You can do the math and realize you can have an opinion on what that math and how human beings will react to it, but the math is the math. So $32 trillion in debt is what I focus on. If you have inflation at 8-9%, what is a real rate of return on government treasuries? It's 10, which is nearly taking up all tax receipts. You see the problem? We can never do that. And that same problem of government debt is in the business sector. And the business sector relies on debt to expand, to provide jobs, because they have a ton of debt already. So they need more debt to pay it off. So what does that mean? The labor market will be destroyed. Maybe inflation will go down, because no one can buy anything. No one has the money to buy anything. It's very frustrating. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Don't forget, tonight, 7:30 Mountain Standard Time, AMA. I'll see all you guys there. Peace.